Alrighty, guys, welcome to the third session of Think Like a Scholar. Today, we're going to be diving into imposter syndrome. This is something that nearly everyone experiences, but hardly anybody actually openly talks about. The feeling of not belonging or not being enough can be really powerful, but it doesn't have to control your academic journey. Today, we'll explore how imposter thoughts develop, why they're so common among high achieving students, and how adopting a growth mindset can transform self doubt into motivation, curiosity, and confidence. This session is meant to normalize these feelings while giving you tools to navigate them in healthier, more productive ways. In this session, we'll start by defining imposter syndrome and identifying what it feels like in academic contexts. Then we'll discuss why so many scholars, especially non-traditional, first generation, and high-achieving students experience imposter syndrome so intensely. From there, we'll explore the basics of a growth mindset and look into how it can help reframe moments of insecurity. Finally, we'll walk through concrete tools and strategies that can help transform imposter feelings into opportunities for learning and connection. So, imposter syndrome often shows up as a quiet, persistent thought or questions of your capability or worth. You might think things like, I'm not good enough, or everyone else understands this better than I do, even when there's no evidence to actually support those beliefs. Some people feel like their achievements are the result of luck rather than skill, while others fear of being found out as if they're pretending to be competent. These thoughts can be overwhelming, but the key to managing them is recognizing them as patterns and not truths. So, who experiences imposter syndrome? Like we discussed before, one of the most important things to understand about imposter syndrome is it doesn't discriminate, and people across all backgrounds can experience it. For example, like we talked about before, high achieving students often feel immense pressure to maintain their high standards. First generation students may feel like they're navigating unfamiliar territory without a roadmap. And others, such as online learners, returning students, or those from marginalized backgrounds, may feel unseen or underrepresented. But anyone who steps into new, competitive, or prestigious environments can experience these feelings. But that doesn't mean it's a personal flaw. It's a response to the situation that you're placed in. So let's talk about why imposter syndrome comes to these types of people, or even you guys. Imposter syndrome doesn't come out of nowhere. It's shaped by cultural and institutional messages about what a real scholar looks like. When you don't see people who share your background represented in certain roles, it can be hard to imagine yourself belonging in that position. Perfectionism and comparison culture, especially in academic settings, fuel these feelings even further. And many students feel pressure to prove their worth, which creates a sense of constant evaluation. Recognizing these structural and cultural roots helps you understand that imposter feelings aren't a sign of personal inadequacy. They're just a symptom of the system that we're placed in. Academic spaces often send subtle messages about whose knowledge counts, and that can make many of us question whether we even belong in that space. But the truth is that your lived experiences are not separate from your academic identity, and instead they're a form of your own expertise. They shape the kind of perspectives that you bring to the table, the questions you ask, and the kind of scholar that you become. A scholarly identity isn't something that a professor gives to you or a title that you wait to earn. It's something that you build through the participation every day in classes, engaging with ideas, asking questions, contributing your voice, and reflecting on what matters to you. More importantly, you don't have to build that identity in isolation. The more we engage with peers and communities, the less imposter syndrome feels like something we have to battle alone. Belonging is created through connection, not through perfection. So as you move through your academic path, remember that showing up authentically in your classes, even if it's imperfectly, and as long as it's consistently, is what grows your academic identity. Presence, engagement, and communities are the foundations of belonging, and that can help combat our imposter syndrome feelings. As we think about academic identity as something we build and not something that we're granted, it's worth asking, how do we build that? How do we show up, especially when things are hard or we doubt ourselves? And this is our first step in combating imposter syndrome. So, what I want to bring up is the topic of a growth mindset and how it can be powerful in combating imposter syndrome. A growth mindset is simply the belief that your abilities are developed through practice, time, and effort, and is not a reflection of your natural ability. Instead of seeing challenges as evidence that you're inadequate, a growth mindset will help to reframe that as an opportunity for your brain to stretch, grow, and strengthen. That way, feedback becomes information rather than judgment on your ability, and mistakes become stepping stones rather than failures. However, this mindset doesn't mean ignoring the difficulty. The difficulty is still there. It just means seeing that difficulty as part of the learning process and not a sign that you don't belong. To see the full impact of a growth mindset, it's helpful to compare it with a fixed mindset, which interprets struggles and mistakes very differently. A fixed mindset thinking tends to interpret struggle as a sign of inadequacy, which a lot of us feel with imposter syndrome. For example, if I don't get it right away, I'm not cut out for this. I don't know how many STEM students have felt that, especially with their chemistry classes, calculus classes, but even with humanities students where you're assigned 100 pages of reading in a week. And you're like, how am I going to get this done? By using a growth mindset, we can take that phrase and reframe it into this is difficult for now, which means that I'm learning. In a fixed mindset, mistakes will feel like proof of not being smart, whereas a growth mindset interprets those mistakes as a direction for you to focus your learning next. So, I mean, take it as in your elementary school. A lot of people didn't know how to add 1 plus 1. But that didn't mean that you were incapable of learning math. It meant that it was a new, difficult task for you to learn and that you had to put the work into it in order to get better. Just because you fail at something doesn't mean that you're automatically bad at it. Sometimes it just takes a little bit more practice. Shifting from that fixed mindset to growth thinking doesn't eliminate the challenge. It's still hard, but it'll help you navigate it a little bit more with compassion for yourself and resilience towards those challenges. So now let's talk about reframing that imposter syndrome thoughts. Reframing is a skill that takes practice. When you think, I don't belong here, you can reframe that to shift that thought into, I'm learning and growing like everyone else. When you fear being found out, you can reframe that fear to remind you that capability grows with experience. If you feel behind, reframing that feeling can help acknowledge that pace is individual to each person, personal, and nonlinear. Reframing isn't about pretending things are easy or forcing yourself into toxic positivity. I'm gonna get it. I worked so hard. I put so many hours into it. I just gotta get it. It's about giving yourself a gentler, more truthful interpretation of what's happening. And here are 4 ways to start practicing that. Our first way to reframe is by acknowledging. By recognizing your self-doubt without judging it, um, you'll be able to catch yourself thinking things like, I don't deserve to be here. However, you can acknowledge that feeling is normal in response to challenge and not evidence that you're inadequate. Imposter thoughts are incredibly common in academic spaces, And noticing them is that first step. Next, what you can do is reaffirm your own achievements and strengths. Imposter thoughts tend to erase our history of competence. But affirming yourself doesn't mean bragging. It simply means reminding yourself about the real experiences, skills, and successes that demonstrate your capabilities. Let's say you're doing Calculus 2. You're not going to be great at it right away. But if you got to Calculus 2, that means you passed Calculus 1, which means you probably passed pre-calc, which means you probably passed algebra, and all of the other building steps. So instead of just forgetting all of your past experiences, sometimes it can be helpful to reaffirm your knowledge that you currently have. The next way to reframe imposter thoughts is through challenge. Gently challenge the story in your mind telling you all of these different imposter thoughts. Ask yourself, okay, I don't get this right away, but what else could be true? Instead of accepting a thought like, I'm not good enough, try shifting it to, this is difficult because I'm learning something new, and use actual evidence to help counter the negative narrative. Finally, visualize your growth. Picture the future of yourself who has learned the skill, completed the project, or navigated the challenge successfully. Sometimes visualization can help you reorient your mind towards a possibility rather than a fear, making it easier to act with confidence while you're still learning. So instead of focusing on how I'm never going to get it, I couldn't get any of these problems right, and I might as well drop out or change my major, think about a situation in where you have achieved these skills. How might you apply it? Or think about, okay, this is the last math class that I got to get through. So even if I'm not a big fan of it or I'm not too great at it, I may not have to use it in my future. And that's okay too. As we practice reframing these moments of doubt, it also helps to ground ourselves in the ways that we already have skills that we bring to the table. You're not starting from nothing. Just because you have imposter thoughts, again, doesn't mean you don't have any skills that you've already built up. Even when self-doubt is loud, it's important to remember the qualities you already carry with you. These aren't random traits. They're a part of you and who you are as a scholar, and they deserve recognition. So let's go over some of the most important scholarly strengths that a lot of you already have. For one, your curiosity. Curiosity is what pulls you towards new ideas. It's the reasons you ask questions, you explore, you research, and you make connections that others might overlook. Being curious and having curiosity is one of the strongest indicators of long-term success in academic spaces. It can drive you to learn and grow in ways that other skills might not. Second, persistence. Your persistence shows up every time you keep going, even when the material is hard, the week is long, or the path feels overwhelming. Showing up again and again when you feel like you're gonna fail is not a small thing, and it's core to scholarly strengths. Again, for our STEM people, if you think about it, every time you're doing an experiment, 90% of the time it's gonna fail. Humanities people, social sciences, when you're doing your literature reviews, there's millions and millions of texts, but you keep slogging through, you keep looking through the text until you find what you need for your projects. Third is critical thinking. Your ability to pause, analyze, and evaluate ideas helps you move beyond surface level understanding. Critical thinking is not about having the right answer. It's about asking better questions and making sure they're thoughtful and informed and they help your decisions. Fourth is community awareness. I know when you think of your scholarly strengths, a lot of them are individual, but it's so important to have a community, not only for some to lean on people for strength, but your lived experiences and your awareness of others enrich your academic conversations. Understanding diverse perspectives makes you a better collaborator, thinker, and problem solver. This is a strength that many scholars underestimate, but deeply shapes the quality of your learning. I mean, if you think about it, there are plenty of scholars who have research that they can't disseminate to anybody. They can't tell anybody about their research. And what is the point of researching if you can't actually tell anybody? Then really you're the only one who knows about it. Last is the idea of connection or idea connection. One of the most powerful abilities in linking concepts, seeing patterns, bridging disciplines, and finding relationships, and is finding relationships between ideas. That creative synthesis is how innovative solutions emerge. Taken together, all five of these strengths form the foundation of your scholarly identity. They're already present. A lot of you already have it. A lot of you are actively using them and recognizing them, and it's part of being more confident in academic spaces. So now you have an insight into how you think and the strengths that you bring. The next step is to connect the dots, mapping the moments that tend to shake your confidence so you can see those patterns clearly and stop them as they emerge. Again, imposter feelings don't come out of nowhere. They usually have patterns and triggers. Take a moment to reflect on a recent time when you doubted yourself. What set it off? Was it a new environment, a challenging assignment, speaking up in class, or even comparing yourself to someone else? Notice what story you told yourself in that moment. Maybe it sounded like, I'm not smart enough, everyone else is ahead of me, or they're gonna realize I don't belong here. Now imagine looking at yourself in the same moment through a growth mindset lens. How can you reframe those stories? For example, this is hard because I'm learning something new. It makes sense that I'm nervous. This is stretching and growing my understanding. This assignment isn't about eliminating your self-doubt. It's about mapping the patterns behind it so that you can recognize your triggers and respond in ways that are more honest, supportive, and sustainable for you. Once you've mapped your imposter triggers, the next step is learning how to respond them with skills that support your growth rather than shut you down. These practices aren't about avoiding discomfort. They're about giving yourself tools to move through it with more clarity and confidence and more calm overall. When imposters' feelings come up, start by naming them without judgment. Acknowledge that they're normal and temporary. Shift your focus from achieving perfection to steady progress. Reach out to peers, mentors, or instructors for support as connection. Ask questions early and often. Use your curiosity as a strength. And celebrate your small wins and remind yourself that discomfort is part of the learning process, not evidence that you're failing. So let's go over each one of these six briefly. One of the most effective ways to interrupt your imposter spiral is simply by naming what you're feeling. Okay, you're anxious, you're embarrassed, you're overwhelmed, you're under pressure. Create a space between the feeling and your reaction. Sometimes naming emotions can help your brain shift from survival mode into understanding mode. Next, imposter syndrome thrives when we measure ourselves only against perfection. By focusing on small wins like finishing a reading, asking a question, making a plan, it'll help retrain your mind to notice that growth. Progress is what builds confidence, not flawless outcomes. In addition, imposter feelings often whisper, you're the only one that feels this way. I can't tell you how many times I've heard from students, I'm the only one who doesn't get this. I'm never going to understand it. I don't belong here. I don't know what I'm doing. But when you talk to your peers, you realize that this is more widespread than initially you would think. By sharing your feelings with others, you can normalize that experience and help dissolve the isolation that intensifies self-doubt. Especially if any of you guys are online students, it's an incredibly isolating journey. And I strongly recommend that you try reaching out to either students in your classes that you notice their names a lot, trying some of the Discords, the Facebooks, just anything where you can get a little bit more of that community to kind of help you through your way with school. Next, we'll talk about celebrating your wins. Taking the time to acknowledge your accomplishments, big or small, can help counter some of your brain's negativity and reinforce your self-worth. I think all of us have heard about, oh, I'm going to study for a little bit and then I'm going to get a little sweet treat. By celebrating your wins, you can help spark in some of that dopamine to combat that negativity and the self-doubt. This practice strengthens your internal narrative so that confidence becomes part of your baseline and not an exception for when you're only achieving perfection. Next, recognize that asking questions is not a sign of your inadequacy. It's a sign of engagement. Curiosity deepens understanding, and the willingness to ask for clarity is a major strength in academic spaces. And every question builds that scaffolding for future learning. And then finally, accept discomfort. Growth and discomfort are inseparable. Instead of viewing discomfort as a sign that you don't belong, see it as evidence that you're stretching. This reframing helps transform discomfort from a threat into meaningful part of learning. As we look at these tools for managing imposter feelings, there's one more piece that we already kind of talked about that really transforms that experience. And again, we talked about this just about 2 minutes ago, but it really deserves its own space. That piece of the puzzle is community. Imposter syndrome doesn't just live in our minds, it grows in the spaces when we're isolated. It thrives in silence. When we keep our doubts to ourselves, they can feel like the absolute truth. But the moment you share your experience with someone else, you break the cycle of isolation and reduce the shame that often accompanies self-doubt. Community reminds you that you're not alone, that other people struggle too, and that your doubts don't define your abilities. Building supportive learning circles, whether formal or informal, strengthens your learning and solidifies your academic journey. It doesn't have to be something that is ASU based. You can even find community within your home, your friends, wherever you are. If it's a hobby, anything that can kind of help support your journey. Belonging isn't something that you wait on being granted. Don't wait for somebody to extend a hand to invite you into a group. Go out and seek those groups, seek that community. It can be scary, but oftentimes is rewarding. Community is something that you co-create with others who understand your journey. When you show up for one another, you create an environment where imposter feelings have far less room to grow. And this is one of the reasons why we really started up the Liminal Society. We wanted an area where undergraduate students could learn to grow their academic abilities, specifically when it comes to dense text and critical reading. Not only is it a super important skill across all disciplines, humanities, social science, and STEM, but there is also this increasing epidemic of students having a really tough time reading text, all kind of text, journal articles, books, regular articles, and thinking critically about that. And so even if you can't join with our Discord and engage a little bit that way, we do strongly recommend that you guys keep showing up to these workshops and seminars where next spring we hope to go over some really good workshops to have like applicable tools. Like, for example, we're going to have a workshop on, I didn't do the reading before class. What do I do now? And maybe that'll help give you some skills to, instead of reading text word by word, line by line, but helping you manage all of your different responsibilities but still get the task done that you need to get done in a timely manner. As we close, I want you to think about one belief you hold about yourself as a scholar and that you want to rewrite. Maybe it's the idea that you always have to be perfect, or that your questions aren't valid, or that you're not as capable of others. Acknowledge that belief and imagine what it would look like to replace it with a more compassionate, growth-oriented perspective. Again, this isn't about ignoring the challenges that you face. It's about telling yourself a story that empowers you rather than limits you. And I know that was pretty brief, you guys, but thank you so much for showing up to this session and for yourself. Every time you choose to engage, reflect, and learn, you're building your scholarly identity. Imposter feelings may still arise, but you now have some tools to navigate them with more clarity, compassion, and confidence. Remember that your growth is ongoing and that your presence enriches academic spaces. Even if you don't feel like it, you always have something to contribute that is worth value to the conversation. And as we go along with all these sessions, we'll keep building these skills and continue to think like scholars. I know I said this a little bit beforehand before we started the recording, but if you didn't have the chance to join any of our previous sessions, you can find the recordings and presentation materials on our website, which you can grab through the QR code. And as a reminder, if you join at least 3 of these sessions, you can earn a certificate at the end of the series. I definitely look forward to seeing you guys all at our next session on Thursday, where we're going to talk about how to build up those communities, especially as a non-traditional student. Even if you are a traditional student right out of high school, I definitely think that there are some good tips and tricks for you guys to learn. But in general, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now. And if you guys wanted to have any comments, concerns, questions, you can feel free to drop them in the chat or pop onto your microphone.
Um, yeah, thank you for hosting this event. This is my first time attending this, so I didn't know what to expect, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, this one, for this series, it's less of an interactive workshop. We do
Yeah.
have a lot of interactive ones planned for
Mm-hmm.
spring, but we are still
Mm-hmm.
working on some helpful worksheets as well.
Mm-hmm.
We tried to focus on really building up the aspect of thinking about what it means to be a scholar. So we talked
Mm-hmm.
about think like a scholar. What does that mean? How to belong, talking about communities. We also have another session that is about communicating across the disciplines. But a
Mm-hmm.
lot more of those ones in Springs that we have set up is we have one that's talking about more actionable stuff. So we'll do one on color coding for reading.
Mm-hmm.
The other one that I spoke about with like, I didn't do the reading. I've got like an hour before class. How do I get through all of these texts and get what I need for class? Things like that. If you guys ever have any type of workshops that you'd really like to see put on, or any questions, or honestly, if you just need a community to reach out to somebody and you're like, I'm struggling, can anybody help me? Does anybody have any resources? You can definitely hit me up, or even the VPs that we have in the club as well. And I did want to let you guys all know we are launching an undergraduate interdisciplinary journal next year. So as you're writing stuff, if you have anything, we're pretty broad about it. So not only are we going to be accepting brief portions of like thesis projects, also journal articles, but we'll also be accepting some of the creative arts as well. So parts of zines, actual like photography exhibits, and it all centers around, for that at least, about bringing in that human lived experience into everything that we do as scholars. So it's all about making whatever is important to you matter to the rest of everybody else. As I kind of described, a big problem that we're having in STEM is we've got all this research, but nobody knows how to communicate it to the general public. And when you don't know how to communicate your interests and your research to a wider population, it doesn't matter. And even if it matters, it doesn't matter. And so that's the big focus on that. Um, but definitely, I loved having you guys all here. If you guys have any questions about imposter syndrome, I mean, I know I have faced that a lot. I'm a biochemistry, medicinal chemistry student. So I've been in STEM, but I also have a bachelor's degree in international studies. So I also got you on that side. I had probably 400 pages of reading a week in that class and dense international text where I'm reading a bunch of old guys' thoughts on stuff. Yes, absolutely. So for the previous recordings, I do have them on the website and I will drop that in the chat. You can also do a QR code if you have your phone, but if you're already on your phone, it makes that a nightmare. So let me just drop our website for you. I have it right here. And then we will be adding also additional materials. We're just working on infographics currently, and then also worksheets for you guys for each of the sessions. So definitely check back to our website later on that. And in general, let's see here. These are the recordings that I'm dropping. So that is the link to the recordings. It says event recordings, but if you go up to the event tabs, it'll also say past event materials. For each of the recordings, we are posting the PowerPoints along with that. So you'll have access to that as well. Perfect. No, absolutely. And again, super grateful for you guys to all come. If you guys, again, want to reach out privately about any comments, questions, concerns, if you are really needing support in any particular area, feel free to reach out to me. I'll drop my email in the chat. And I am chronically online. I am an online student, so I'm kind of online with everything. So I usually get back to people within, let's give myself some grace and say 48 hours to make sure that I actually reply to you. But other than that, anybody else have any other questions? All right, perfect. Thank you guys so much for coming. I hope you guys have a great time. Hopefully, I'll see you on Thursday. If I don't, there's going to be a recording. And just remember, if you do attend 3 times, we do have 2 more sessions available. You will be receiving a certificate for the Think Like a Scholar series.
All right. See you Thursday.
Thank you guys. Have a great day.